Okay, so this is the first workshop, and it's going to be an introduction to like the backend. So we're using Flask and MongoDB. So we're making a web app today, and the web app is just to add and store recipes. The front end is going to be in React, and the back end is going to be in Flask. So I'm going to be going through some of the code today, but I'm not going to be able to go line by line. So there's a GitHub repo here, and that's like the short URL for it. So if you want to go there, you can see the full detail of code. Oh, that's actually the URL for the presentation. So have that on hand for sure. Okay, so I'll show you guys the app. So this is the app. It's just like a recipes app, and you can add recipes and delete them. And so this is what we'll be working towards. So this first part will just be the back end of this app. And then later on in the day, around 2 p.m., we'll have the front end workshop, which will be React. Okay.
So what is front end? So everything you see on the website, such as the colors, buttons, links, and animations, are all part of front end. So a front end developer's job is to basically take the vision and the design of the client and to implement their app code. And the skill set that you'll need for front end are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So front end is where the client-side processes run, and the frameworks are React, Vue, and AngularJS. All right. And backend is basically everything that you cannot see on the website. So when you press a button, all the processes that run behind are basically what you do in backend. So backend developers ensure that the website performs correctly. And they deal with things such as reading and writing data from the database server. And this is where all the API calls are defined so that the front end and backend can communicate with each other. And they're also referred as a server-side software. So some frameworks you can use for backend are Flask, Node, Django, Express, and databases such as MongoDB, which we'll be covering today, MySQL and Oracle, etc. So Flask is basically this Python web app framework, and it doesn't require particular tools or libraries. And it's very popular for backend development due to its simplistic nature. So it's very beginner friendly. And we just have a link for the cheat sheet here. And this is pretty useful for setting up the basic bare bone framework of Flask app. So I highly recommend you check that out.
So we'll be using MongoDB as a database, and this is a NoSQL database. What that basically means is it's not like a table, tabular structure. They have very flexible schemas. And you can put lots of document types in them, like, for example, JSON files, which will be the one we're working on today. So we'll be using MongoDB Atlas, which is like the cloud database, right, to host our database. And we'll also be using a library called PyMongo. And this is like the main library that's used to connect and interact with MongoDB using Python. So just quickly to cover what a JSON file format is. So within this, there's lots of data types like number, string, array, objects. Object is very similar to what everyone might have learned in Python, in Foundations of Computing in Python. So it's just like a dictionary. You have your key value pairs. And an array is also very similar to like Python lists, and it's just an array of objects. So yeah, you can nest kind of these things inside of each other. Like you can have an array of these kind of dictionary objects, and you can also have like objects within objects. Basically they're just like a lightweight format, and yeah, we'll be using this. And here's a cheat sheet if you find it useful. It's just got some more examples.
So today we'll be working in a virtual environment. So basically what a virtual environment is that it's an isolated system where we can install libraries and scripts. And why we want to use the virtual environment is because it keeps dependencies such as Flask required by different projects separate and isolated. And network applications that allow a user to interact with both the computing environment and the work of others. And there are no limits to the amount of environments you can have in each virtual environment. So what is an API? An application programming interface is basically the what stands for API. And it's a software intermediary, and it allows for two applications to talk to each other. So for example, when you're using an application on your phone, the application connects to the internet and sends data to the server. The server then retrieves that data, interprets it, and performs the necessary actions and sends back to your phone. And today we'll be writing APIs in the backend, which access the database in some way, such as that it retrieves all records from the database. The front end will show those API functions to communicate with the backend to the database.
All right, so there are HTTP methods. So these are basically like request response protocols. So the most popular ones are like get, post, put, delete. So you use get when you basically want to get some data from your database. Post is used to create data, and so it's like writing to the database. Put is used to update data, and then delete is to delete data. So we'll be using Postman today, which is like an API testing tool. So yeah, I'll be showing that in the demo. This is the fully built app, by the way. So I'm going to stop running this because we're going to start from scratch with the backend. And this is what Postman looks like, by the way. Right. So the first thing we'll do is set up a MongoDB Atlas account. Okay, so this is for your cloud database. You can follow along, and remember I did give the URL for the slides. I can quickly go back to it. So this is the URL for the slides. So make sure you have that in so you can follow along as well. And so go back. So you go in here and you basically need to make an account. You can just do like a free Google account and connect with your Google account if you want to. And so what I'll do is I'll wait for you guys to catch up, actually. So let me know when you've kind of reached this kind of page.
Can we go back to the slides with the URL?
Yeah, I can. So go to this website to get access to the cloud MongoDB and register an account there. So by the way, not everyone needs to follow along. So I'm assuming you guys are going to be working in teams, right? So you only need one cloud database that you all use, right? So you don't all need to make separate databases, but you can if you want, just for like the sake of this tutorial. And yeah, not everyone has to follow along. If you just want to listen and do it later, you can do that too. So after you've made like an email login, you'll see this kind of page. It doesn't really matter what you put on here. You can just put in anything. It's just asking your preferences pretty much. And then you'll have an option to choose between databases. So make sure you click shared, the free option. Okay. After that, you can just go through the defaults and then click next. So I'll wait for everyone to just do that. You've already done that. Just wait. I'll give you more instructions soon. So after that, you'll see a screen that kind of looks like this. The idea is you make a user in this database so you can connect from it in Flask. Okay. For this demo, I've just done like admin password 1 just to make it easier when I'm explaining the demo. For you, probably do something a bit more secure than that, and you don't have to share your password to anyone. But yeah, I'll let you do that. Okay, after that, it's asking where would you like to connect from? So here, only people who've got like the IP address that's on this list are allowed to connect to the database. Otherwise, it won't let you. So you can just click add my current IP address here for now, and it should work just on your own computer. But just be aware that when let's say you're making the database for your whole team and they want to also connect to it, then you'll also have to add their IP address on this account. So you can do that, or you can also go into the settings and allow access from anywhere. And I'll show this later as well, how to do that. So add your current IP address here. Okay. And then after you've done that, you should have a cluster. So it should look something like this. So after you finish up. So let everyone get to the stage first. So yeah, so there's an option for local and cloud. So make sure you click local environment. Basically, this means you'll be able to locally run your database. Would anyone like any more time? I'll move on to the next part. All right, so I'm going to show you, this is what your database looks like. And on the left-hand side, you've got a bunch of things. So walk around. Yeah. So this is the IP thing I was talking about. This is like my current IP address, but if I want to share it with someone else, they'll have a different IP address and they won't be able to access it unless their IP address is on the list. So what you can do is you can allow access from anywhere. I'm not going to do that. So if you click this button, allow access from anywhere, and confirm that, it'll allow it. This is like a bit of a security risk though. So you can either add IP individually based on your team members, like their IP, or you can do this. All right. Another thing to do is you've got your database user that you just made. You have to make sure you edit their permissions. Okay. So by default, this section, built-in role, it will have nothing in it. So make sure you click into that and change it to read and write to any database. Okay, so let everyone do that. I'll just go over what I covered just then. So, because on Zoom, I wasn't sharing my screen. So here, these are the set of IP addresses. You can add the IP address and allow access from anywhere to allow everyone to, like anyone to get access to it, pretty much. Otherwise, you have to individually add like IP addresses. So I'll do that. And then for database access, you've got your user that you just created. Make sure you go down to built-in role and select read and write to any database. And then click update. All right. Everyone good with that? I'll give a bit more time to that. Sure, I can do that. So go into network access from your MongoDB, add IP address, and then because I've already got it, that's why I need to get rid of it because it doesn't show up. Add IP address, allow access from anyone. And that will let anyone access it. Yeah, and then confirm. Okay, good. Cool. So if you go to database, you can see your cluster. So this is a cluster that you've made. So hopefully it should be loaded up now. What you'll need to do is press connect. And then after that, connect your application. And then select Python as a driver. I've got Python 3, like the latest version of Python installed. So I'm clicking this one. But you should also have Python installed and it should be similar. Okay. So this thing here, this is like the connection string, right? So we'll be using this later on and I'll show you how to use it in your code as well. Okay. So this is my username, right? Admin for that user I made. And then you just need to insert your password here. So replace this whole thing with whatever password you have. Okay. So I'm just showing this to show you this is how you do connections. And we'll be using it a bit later. Okay. So from now, I'm going to actually make the Flask app. So I basically just made an empty folder for Flask server, and I'm going to open that up on Visual Studio Code. Okay. So we'll give time for people to do that too. Just go If you already have Visual Studio, for example, okay, it's a fair amount of people. Okay. For anyone who doesn't have it, start downloading it, okay? But you might be a bit behind. But I would say mainly follow on the tutorial, and then you can kind of follow steps later on if you want to. So once you've got VS Code up, what we'll do, so this folder is basically everything inside my backend is going to go inside this folder, Flask server. And later on, we'll have a separate folder for the front end stuff. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, I'll change it into live mode. Is let us see. Okay. So go on new terminal and CD into Flask server. So it should already be open, but if it's not, so do CD and then you type in what you want, like what folder, and then click tab until it shows up. So currently I'm already there, which is why it's not working. So it's time people do that. So make sure like the address ends with Flask server, basically. What I'm trying to say. Anyone having trouble with So if you make an empty folder into your documents, your file explorer, right? Copy the link address at the top. Okay. Open a new window on Visual Studio Code. Click open folder. Okay, and then paste the link at the top. And that's it. Select the folder. Okay, and then you should get something like this. So this is just the folder that I just made recently. So create a new folder, just call it whatever you want. You can call it Flask server and CD into it. After you've done that, what we're going to do is basically something called setting up a virtual environment. Okay, so the steps are on the slide. There are slightly different commands for Mac and Windows. In general, whenever I do Python, because I have a Windows computer, if you have a Mac, do Python 3, okay, instead. And same here. So Windows, this is the command. You can see that you have to put a source in front of it. So step one, skip step one. Most people would probably skip step one because you do have Python 3. Okay, so don't do step one. So what you'll first do is this command. So Python -m virtual environment. When you do that, you see this folder that came up. This is your virtual environment. Okay, so you've created it. You only need to do step once. Okay, so after you do that, you now need to go to step 3 and run your virtual environment. Okay, so here I'll do the Windows command. So dot the name of what I just made, environment. Oops. Okay. So do you see this thing at the start here? That tells you that you're running a virtual environment. You're inside it right now. Okay. So I'm going to let everyone do that and give some time for people to do that. If you don't have Python installed, make sure you install Python. So who knows the command how to install Python? Does anyone know? Yeah. Sorry? Yeah, that should work. So to try this out, continue the
Yeah.
So for downloading Python, look up on Google Python downloads. Okay, go onto here and just download the latest version. Okay. So for anyone who doesn't have Python, download this and run this and get this set up.
I graduated.
Might have to get pushed on. Sorry about that.
I think Denmark. Did you find your last? I have to get So the question one, this question is probably this question. Every time but I think of this as like, think of that as like,
So there is this error that starts to happen in this. So if you have any errors, I would try Googling it. If it's something, there was this error I remember I got, which was, I don't remember what the error was exactly, but I think it was related to script permissions. And then I Googled it and it said this solution and I just implemented it. Okay. So there are also a lot of people who are struggling to have Python installed as well. And it'll probably take a lot of time. And we do have to wrap up the workshop around 12 as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the steps of the workshop, and this will all be recorded so you can watch it later. And then afterwards, we will help people to get the setup stuff done, because setup stuff can take a long time. Okay. Okay, so after you've done that, so you've got your virtual environment running. What we're going to do is create a few files. So I'm going to create an app.py file. So py means Python. Okay. I'm also going to create a .gitignore. What this does is that if you're working with Git, it ignores any files that are specific to your computer. Okay. And then I'm also going to make one more file. Environments.txt. Okay. So for the gitignore, I have something already copied over, and remember that there is a repository that you can access. So I'll just give it to you. So in this repo, you can access what this gitignore is if you want to. So you go into Flask server, you can see it. So all the stuff I'll be going through is in this repo later, so you can access it. So don't worry about trying to get it down right now. Follow along the presentation first would be how I will do it. Okay. So this is the gitignore. So I'm going to just copy this and put this into my gitignore. Okay. These are basically like the environment files, right? This is very specific to your computer. You don't want to push it and give it to other people as well and make them download it on Git. So we have separate environment files, and you just basically means whenever you push to Git, this ignores it. Okay. So you've got this. So while you're running a virtual environment, do pip install Flask. Okay, so this might be pip 3 for Mac people. Okay, and then this should take a bit of time and it should install Flask. All right, so after that, what we're going to do is this command, pip freeze requirements.txt. So what this does is basically it saves your current versions into this folder, into this new file. Okay. And so this just gets used later on. So app.py, this will be the main file for your Flask server. Okay. So what we're going to do is I've got some really basic code. So this code is a really simple bare bones app for Flask. Okay. This imports the Flask. This creates like an app, it just initializes it. This is an example of an API, right? This API is really simple. All it's saying is like at the root directory, just return this. Okay. I'm not even accessing the database yet. Okay. And then this one is basically saying I want to run my app on port 8000. Okay. After you've done that, you have to run this file. So Python app.py. When you run it, it opens up on this server. Okay. And so if you go onto the server, you can see that this is the root directory and it's returning what I expected. Okay. So that's a really example of a test API. Just like a really sample API. I'm not even using the database yet. Okay. So currently the server is running, and so it says Control C to quit. So you can quit it, and it's a good idea to quit while you're editing, okay? So after this, I'm going to show you some other things. So we need to install, pip install Flask by Mongo, okay? And pip install DNS environment. Okay, so I'm going to run all of these, and if you want, they are also on the slides as well. Okay, so all these ones. Okay. So when you run them, what these do is PyMongo allows you to connect to the MongoDB database. Okay, DNS allows you to like query the database, so that should get installed. And I know that every step of the way you might have troubles, and I'm gonna wrap up this part of the workshop soon and come around and help everyone too. Okay. So after you've done that, we're gonna just save the requirements again into this text file. Okay. Now what we're gonna do is create a new file called database.py. So it's a Python file. And in this, we're gonna include some database related stuff. So if you look at MongoDB, do you remember how you got this connection string? So we're going to use this now. Okay. So I have this file already here, and I will copy it over and show you guys what I've done. So what this does, first import Flask, and then import PyMongo. So what we just installed, right? Then you put in your connection string. You put in your connection string from that MongoDB website we were just looking at. And make sure before this was like password. So if you looked here, see how this is password. You're meant to enter your own password for whatever user you've just made. So I made an admin user with a password 1. So I just put that there. Okay. Then client equals pymongo.mongo client, and then pass in the connection string. What this line will basically get a database labeled this. So if you don't have a database labeled this, it will just create one. So that's what it does. And then this one gets the collection from the database. So all this code is on the GitHub repo as well. Okay. So now we can try testing how our database is working in terms of our API. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this code over. So at the very top, I'm going to put in a line that says import DB. What that means is import this database Python file that we've written and make sure it's accessible within this file. Okay. And then this is a test API. So what you have to do here, this is basically saying that we're going to go inside the database and we're going to insert one document, right? And this will just be a random document I just made. Okay. So if you want to test this, what you do is Python app.py, get your server running, okay? And go to your server. And so this is the root directory, right? So this is just with a slash at the end. What this means here, this is the API endpoint. So it's saying test, right? And so if you go here and test, right? It returns connected to the database. So you can see that there. I'm going to go into my database now. And what you're going to do is go into Browse Collections, go into Collections. And then in your collections, you should see a new document has been added. And that means it's connected to the database. Okay, so I just created that one and it got added. So we're going to do some more API calls as well. So I'm going to get rid of this one because I don't want it. So that was just one test API. We can do lots of others. So one example is this one. Okay. So what this API does is it gets all the things inside my database. So because I'm making the recipes app, it's all going to be recipes. All right. The endpoint is called getAll, and the function here is find. So before I used insert, right, to insert a record. Here I want to find them all. Okay. This basically iterates through all the ones that it found. Okay. And it returns it as like a JSON array. Another thing is that MongoDB has this thing called an object ID. Okay? This is like a special data type in MongoDB. And when you put it directly into Python, it will throw an error saying that this object is not JSON serializable. So all I've done here is I've just converted it into a string. Okay, that way it doesn't throw an error. So that's just the point of that. It's just a small detail. Okay. So after you do that, you can see that currently in my database, I've got all these recipes, right, that I showed you at the start. So what this will do is it will retrieve all of them. So run your server, go onto here, and then go into the API endpoint to get all. It does not work. JSON file is not defined. So if you ever go into an error, read what the error is, and you can probably figure it out. So one thing you have to do is you need to import this. Okay, so you import this from the top. It's from Flask as well. Okay, so let me try that again. Okay. And you can see this has returned all of them. I'm going to show you Postman. So Postman is this API interface. You can do pretty much the same thing. And then I want to get request in this one. Click send, and you can see what it returns. So it's just a nice kind of interface for it. Okay. All right. So that was one API. Another API I want to show you is this one. So for this one, request is not defined. This one also gets imported from pods. Okay. What the point of this one is it inserts a record into my database. Okay. Basically, what happens is that I pass something into my body of my request. Okay. So this is a post request, and requests have bodies, and so you can pass in something, right? You can pass in something that has name, ingredients, method, like in this kind of dictionary format, right? And it will save it into my cloud database, right? So let's try this and see what happens. So API endpoint is add one. So I'm going to go, what's this? What do you think will happen when I press enter? What do you think I'll see? Have I passed in anything into the body? No. So when you do this, it will say method not allowed. Okay. So so far, I've been using the URL to do all the get methods, right? Like just like on my browser. For post methods, this is a post method. All the other ones have been get. Okay. So if there's nothing defined by default, it means get. Okay. This one is post. For post, you can't use your browser. You have to use some kind of API testing tool. You'd have to use something like Postman. Okay. So what you do is you go to the endpoint, you make sure you change this request to a post, and you put something into the body. Okay. So you can put anything. Well, you want to put a recipe because that's what we're expecting. Okay. So I've got like a recipe example. So let's go down. So this is just an example recipe. So The name is noodles. The ingredient is 1 packet of noodles, and this is the method. So it's a JSON object, okay? It's just like kind of dictionaries, like what you've learned. So all you have to do is pass this into the body, click raw, and then JSON as well, okay? And then when you send that, it returns it back, right? And that's actually what I've specified here as well. JSONified is to return it back, okay? And you can go into your database, and you can see, if you refresh your database, that now that noodles object should be in my database. So let's refresh. So you can see this object here, and I just added it in at the bottom here as well, right? So that's how you insert something. Okay, and one more thing I want to show you. This is pretty much the last thing, and then after that, we'll do setup stuff. So the last API I want to show you is to delete recipes. Okay. So I'm going to copy this one in. So what this is like a delete method. So we've done get, we've done post, and now we're doing delete. Okay. What this does is you pass in into the body the ID of the object. So you see that object we just made. This is the object ID, right? So you pass that in, and it basically removes that object from the database. Okay. What you need to do though is, because I told you this is like a special data type in MongoDB, you need to import it. So there's an import line. So I'm going to put this at the top. So all import lines go at the top. So from this library, import this. So how I figured this out is basically Googling, right? If you get into an error, you Google it, and you try to figure out how to fix it. So this basically just converts it back into an object ID, because we were dealing with it as a string. And then that way, MongoDB knows what to do with it. And then the record gets deleted. So the function is delete one. Okay, so before we were doing inserting, we had done find all of them. We had done insert again. So this time we're doing deleting. Okay, so all I have to do, I'll show you this again as well. If I try to go onto this API endpoint, it's not going to work as well, because it's not a get request. So you can only do get requests on your browser. Okay. So what you need to do for these ones is you need to use the testing tool. So if I use something like Postman, you change the endpoint, you go to delete, and in the body, you need to specify what you want to delete, okay? So it's expecting an object of this form with an ID. So look here, that's the kind of form it's expecting, right? And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to get something random from my database and delete it. So we can get rid of soup. You just need to copy the object ID and pass it in to Postman. And then send the request. And it returns it back because that's what I told it to do. And so now if I refresh my database, soup was at the second bottom document. It should be gone because I deleted it. So let's let it load. Okay, you can see soup is not there anymore, right? It's deleted. Okay, that's pretty much all I wanted to show you in terms of APIs and Flask. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is pretty much stop this part of the workshop. So I won't be covering any more content, and we'll just be going around and trying to help people get set up and things like that. Okay, so I'm also going to stop recording as well.